As half-brother and shadow to Queen Marika the Eternal, Maliketh the Black Blade has never known an existence outside of a one-minded, indisputable servitude. As a tool wielded for his master's prideful lust to persist, his sworn duty was to protect the manifestation of destined death that Marika stole, the Rune of Death. And in doing so, this would cut short the cycle of life and death, of perpetual rebirth and spiritual flow, and this would make him complicit in causing the rot and decay that characterizes the lands between. With the rules of the world rewritten, despair and disillusionment set into the populace of this war-torn land as Maliketh took his place as the fearsome defender of Marika's will, wielding a fragment of said rune in his blade to protect it until the end. However, a piece of the rune was stolen from him during the Night of the Black Knives, causing the death of Godwyn the Golden and kickstarting the beginning of the Shattering, the aftermath of which would lead to the lonely post-apocalypse we see after we enter the game. Through these events, Maliketh failed, completely and utterly. Serving Queen Marika dutifully was his only purpose, and so as a result, it is no exaggeration whatsoever to say that protecting the Rune of Death was the entire reason for his existence in his eyes. It was his identity, and so in failing, Maliketh's life had become empty and forlorn. The beast a saddened, despaired husk, unable to do the one thing he was tasked with. From the start, he lived in servitude with no individuality and no will of his own. This was a cursed existence, and it only became more painful when the reason for that existence became null and void. His life was essentially forfeit. Yet he couldn't die because he still had a job to do, and he now had reason to try to atone. Disgraced and resolved to not fail once more, in order to ensure that it would never be stolen from him again, Maliketh sealed the blade containing the remnants of the Rune of Death inside himself. And there it remained, as a constant reminder of his shame and a symbol of his newly steeled conviction. After doing so, Maliketh then became Gurranq, beast clergyman, and gained an insatiable hunger for Deathroot, a root that began growing as a result of the Erdtree coming into contact with the cursed, deathly body of Godwyn, who died as a direct result of Maliketh's inability to defend the rune. Through this hunger, Maliketh was constantly reminded of his sin through not only consuming death itself, but also the literal end result of his failure. This hunger was a pathetic show of his shame. It was his punishment, his eternal reminder that he was not good enough. And here Maliketh became a personification of death itself, the one thing he had attempted to cast out for Marika. It was the ultimate disgrace, and in his self-punishing perspective, it was no less than he deserved. During the game, the Tarnished has the ability to help Maliketh attempt to satiate his hunger by seeking out Deathroot and providing him with it, but it is never enough to fill the void in his soul. He can constantly be seen howling in pain, calling towards a deadened sky, which many postulate is partly due to hunger but primarily as a result of his internal agony that never leaves him. His self-loathing is profound, and his actions and behaviors make that abundantly clear. And to compound this, the one person who had sought to help him earlier then confronts him in crumbling Pharaoh Mazula with the intent of stealing the rune he covets and confronting the queen he swore to protect.
Oh, death. Become my blade once more.
And in order to be strong enough to defend Marika's will, he then wields death as a weapon, hating to have to do it, but needing to as a last resort. Through this, he becomes what he despised. He becomes a living and breathing epitome of his humiliation. And in the midst of battle, the loyal beast cannot help but reach out to the Tarnished and wonder why they must take this, why they value it. Maliketh cannot see any reason for wanting anything to do with the thing that caused nothing but misery for him and many others, so broken that he's not able to even understand how and why death could be used in any context for anything other than sadness.
Tarnished. Why wouldst thou? Why? 'Tis no matter. I hereby vow that destined death shall not be stolen again.
The remembrance of the Black Blade states that Marika's sole need of Maliketh was to become a vessel to lock away destined death, and that even still she betrayed him in the end. Following this, some convincing theories have speculated that Marika was actually heavily involved herself in dictating the Night of the Black Knives as part of a longer-reaching plan to defy the Greater Will, and if so, this was the betrayal the remembrance speaks of. It is possible that Marika provided her shadow with this one sole purpose, constantly emphasized the unbelievable importance of that purpose, and made it a one-dimensional reason for his existence, only to plan to set him up to fail and literally seal it away. Knowing better than anyone of Maliketh's loyalty and resolve, this would serve as her purpose of sealing away death as effectively as possible while setting her up later against the will of the Erdtree. If this is true, not only is it as big an indicator of Marika's self-serving cruelty as anything else, but it entirely nails home the futility and emptiness of Maliketh's life and self-punishment. His last words are directed to Marika, begging his master, the one who very likely betrayed him, to forgive him, and that really is Maliketh's life in a nutshell. The lands between are steeped in a desolate loneliness, this profound sense of sadness at the state of things that you can just feel in your bones as you travel. And as this is an almost direct result of Maliketh's actions, this hushed, lamentable tone feels like the Shadow's woes and regret that seep their way into the entirety of the world that he has affected through his misguided actions. Although misguided is an unfair way to put it, since as we established, he never really had a choice, being possibly betrayed and destined to fail a task his master set to him. He was chained from birth to death, resolved, living with a singular purpose, and he consistently failed in anguish. He never really had a chance. By all accounts, Maliketh was never a malicious soul, and may have even been gentle. At least to me, his lament about having to wield, personify, and hunger for death comes not only from a place of shame due to his past sins, but from a desire to not want to kill, to not represent something so vile. And yet, from the beginning, he was forced to dwell in death, bathe himself in darkness, all for the sole purpose that he was born to carry out. And when that went south, he had nothing to quell his suffering except unimaginable loneliness and this insatiable, ironic appetite for that which he despised. From start to finish, Maliketh is one of the most tragic characters in Elden Ring, and a representation of the reason that something needed to change to stop this unending rot and bring forth a new era. Despite being responsible for a great deal of pain in the setting, it is hard for me to not feel sympathetic for Maliketh, and it is even more difficult to not hope that he found some semblance of peace by the end. As unlikely as that may be. Many thanks for watching.